There is no lasting success without resilience, no meaningful progress without resourcefulness. It doesn't matter how much talent you start with. It doesn't matter how many tools you're handed. It doesn't matter how strong your strategy looks on paper. Because the moment things don't go as planned, and they won't, you will be tested. And if you haven't trained your mind, if you haven't built a mindset that can withstand pressure and adapt in real time, you will collapse under the weight of circumstances. You will retreat into comfort. You will abandon the path that was meant for you. A resourceful and resilient mindset is not optional. It's essential. It's what separates the people who panic from the people who pivot. It's what separates the ones who crumble from the ones who create. When the pressure shows up, when the door closes, when the challenge gets real, it's not your knowledge or even your experience that determines your response. It's your mindset. It's the way you think about adversity. It's the way you process setbacks. It's what you believe about your capacity to respond. Most people wait until life forces them to build resilience. They wait until everything falls apart, until they're out of options, until they've hit rock bottom. Then, in the middle of the storm, they try to assemble a mindset that can carry them through. But that's like trying to build a boat while you're already drowning. You don't wait for life to hit before you train your thinking. You build your resilience in advance. You practice resourcefulness before it becomes a requirement. That's how you stay grounded when everything else is shaking. And resilience is not the same as toughness. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's not about pretending you're fine. It's not about pushing through until you break. Real resilience is flexible. It bends, but it doesn't break. It feels, but it doesn't get stuck. It absorbs pressure without becoming hard. It moves forward without demanding that the path be easy. It adapts. It evolves. And that kind of strength can't be bought. It has to be built. Resourcefulness is not about having all the answers. It's about believing that the answer can be found. It's not about having more tools. It's about using the ones you have with creativity and clarity. The most resourceful people are rarely the most resourced. They don't wait for permission. They don't wait for perfect conditions. They look around, they take stock of what's available, and they ask better questions. They say, what can I do with what I have? And then they move. That mindset is gold. That mindset multiplies everything it touches. If you want to be unstoppable, not because life is easy, but because you're ready for it, you need both. You need the grit to keep moving and the creativity to find a way forward. You need the emotional capacity to face hard truths and the mental agility to adjust your plan. You need the ability to absorb failure without becoming it, to lose without quitting, to start again without shame. That's the mindset that changes lives. That's the mindset that creates freedom. That's the mindset that can't be shaken by storms, delays, rejections, or uncertainty. This isn't about becoming invincible. It's about becoming steady, becoming responsive, becoming someone who isn't defined by circumstances, but who defines their response to them. Someone who doesn't just survive chaos, but who builds something in it. Someone who can be trusted with pressure, with leadership, with vision, because their mind has been trained to see through fear and keep building anyway. The first way to build a resourceful and resilient mindset is to stop reacting and start responding. Because reaction is what happens when your nervous system is untrained, when your mind hasn't learned how to pause before it speaks, when your body hasn't been taught to breathe through uncertainty instead of being hijacked by it. Reaction is impulsive. It's based in fear. It's fast, loud, and often wrong. But response Response is power. Response is pause. Response is the ability to see what's happening and still choose your next move intentionally. You build resilience by reclaiming the space between stimulus and decision, the space between what happens to you and what you do about it. Most people live with no gap between those two things. They get triggered and respond with frustration. They feel pressure and spiral into panic. They hear criticism and instantly defend. They see an obstacle and immediately say, I can't. But the most grounded, resourceful people, they insert a pause. They don't suppress the emotion. They observe it. They don't deny the challenge. They step back and look at it. And from that space, they choose their next move instead of letting the moment choose it for them. This skill isn't flashy, but it's transformational. Because in that pause is where clarity lives. In that pause is where you take back your power. You stop handing your authority to your mood, to the opinions of others, to the noise of your environment. You anchor yourself in who you are, not in what just happened. That's how you respond instead of react. And the more often you do it, the stronger you become. To build this pause, you have to train it. You don't wait for chaos to learn control. You practice when it's quiet. You slow your breathing when nothing's wrong, so that you know how to do it when everything is. You learn to name your emotions so they don't control your behavior. You journal, you reflect. You ask yourself hard questions in private so that when the pressure comes in public, you don't lose yourself. This pause becomes your edge because most people never develop it. They stay at the mercy of their reactions. And when you're living in reaction, life is chaotic, unpredictable, exhausting. But when you begin to respond, you take back control. You don't need the world to calm down for you to stay grounded. You become the calm. You become the steady. You become the one people turn to when everything else is spinning. And this isn't about being passive. It's about being precise. You still move. You still act. But you do it from a place of clarity instead of chaos. You make the decision after the emotion, not inside it. You choose your words with intention. You move with purpose. You act from alignment, not anxiety. That's real strength. You start to trust yourself more because you're no longer afraid of pressure. You know you won't snap. You know you won't quit. You know you won't explode. That inner trust becomes your foundation. It tells your mind, we've been here before. We know how to handle this. And in that calm, resourceful energy, you begin to create results you couldn't access in panic. You stop wasting energy because reaction burns fuel. It drains you emotionally. It scatters your focus. It makes every setback bigger than it needs to be. But response focuses your energy. It conserves your power. It lets you move efficiently. It lets you act once instead of overreacting 5 different ways and apologizing later. Every challenge becomes an invitation to practice this. The traffic, the rejection, the delay, the unexpected news, the hard conversation. All of it is training, not punishment, training. Every time something triggers you, ask yourself, what's the best version of me doing right now? And then wait, and then act. That simple rhythm, pause, ask, choose, is how you start living with a mindset that cannot be shaken. Next, the second way to build a resourceful and resilient mindset is to train yourself to ask better questions. Because when pressure hits, when circumstances change, when uncertainty grows, most people ask the wrong questions. Questions that keep them stuck. Questions like, why me? Or what's wrong with me? Or how am I supposed to fix this? These aren't bad questions because they're emotional. They're bad because they focus your energy in the wrong direction. They point you backward. They create shame, not solutions. Your brain is designed to answer the questions you give it. So when you ask it something that focuses on failure, it will give you failure-based answers. Ask it what's wrong with you, and it will scan your memory for every reason why you're not enough. Ask it why you always mess things up, and it will build a case for your limitations. That's how your mindset starts to spiral. Not because of what happened, but because of the questions you're asking in response to what happened. But resourceful people, they ask differently. They get curious instead of critical. When something falls apart, they don't spiral into shame. They pause and ask, what's this here to teach me? What's the opportunity inside the mess? What can I take from this moment that will make me stronger? That's how they stay in motion. That's how they stay solution-oriented. They never let the challenge be the end of the story. They always turn it into a new starting point. You don't have to ignore the emotions, but you do have to direct them. And the fastest way to direct your emotion is to ask it better questions. If you're frustrated, ask, what's the unmet expectation behind this? If you're stuck, ask, what would I try if I wasn't afraid of looking foolish? If you're overwhelmed, ask, what matters most right now? These kinds of questions don't remove the problem, but they give you power inside it. Better questions unlock better strategy, because resilience doesn't just mean pushing through. It means adjusting with wisdom. If something isn't working, and your only question is, why isn't this working? You'll probably get stuck blaming external things. But if your question becomes, what part of this can I own? Or what resource am I not using? Or who do I know that's faced something similar? You've opened a door to new solutions. And this works in real time. The moment something hits you, you have a choice. You can ask disempowering questions that reinforce fear, shame, and stuckness. Or you can ask purposeful questions that center your power, focus your attention, and move you toward growth. You train this habit like any other, through repetition, through awareness, through catching yourself when you slip into autopilot panic and flipping the switch. Start noticing your inner dialogue. Start writing down the questions you ask yourself when things go wrong. Are they helping or hurting? Are they shame-based or solution-based? Are they keeping you small or calling you forward? You can't think your way into a better mindset unless your questions support that thinking. The quality of your mindset is always tied to the quality of your self-inquiry. The questions you repeat become the story you live. So choose wisely. Ask yourself questions that build clarity, not confusion. That build courage, not collapse. That pull you into action instead of pushing you into paralysis. And when you do that long enough, your mind starts to default to possibility instead of panic. That's what resourcefulness sounds like. That's what resilience looks like. Not being fearless, but knowing how to think clearly when fear is loud. Next, the third way to build a resourceful and resilient mindset is to detach from outcome and anchor into process. Because the people who burn out the fastest, the ones who quit the easiest, the ones who panic the moment things don't go as planned, are the people who are too tightly attached to results. They build their entire sense of security on whether things are working the way they expected. But life rarely goes according to plan. And if your peace is tied to perfection, you'll never have peace. Resilient people know how to hold the vision loosely and the habits tightly. They still care about the outcome. They're still committed to the result, but they don't make the outcome the source of their identity. They don't live or die by the metrics. They don't build their confidence based on what happened last week. They build it based on whether or not they're doing the work, because the only part they can control is the process. The outcome might be delayed. It might look different. It might require a longer path, but the process is yours. The commitment is yours. The decision to show up, even when it's boring, even when it's hard, even when it's not glamorous, that's what builds resilience. That's what separates the ones who rise from the ones who quit. Not talent, not timing, just discipline. You can't think your way into certainty, but you can act your way into confidence. And every time you choose the process over the mood, you rewire your mind to keep going. You stop making your performance the scoreboard. You start making your consistency the win. And that shift frees you. It lets you grow without pressure. It lets you stay steady when results are slow. It lets you build something real. The problem is most people are addicted to immediate feedback. They want the scale to move. They want the number to grow. They want the applause, the recognition, the visible sign that it's working. But real growth is often invisible, quiet, long. And the most important shifts in your life will happen beneath the surface before they ever show up in the data. So if you're doing the work and nothing seems to be moving, don't stop. Keep going. Stay in the rhythm. Stay in the stretch. Stay in the repetitions. Trust that your consistency is doing something, even if you can't measure it yet. That trust is how you build a mindset that cannot be shaken. Because now your fuel isn't the outcome, it's the mission. And yes, you can still have goals. You should. They matter. But they can't be your anchor. They can't be the only reason you show up. Because goals might change. Conditions might shift. Circumstances might reroute your path. But the process, the daily actions, the non-negotiables you've decided to live by, those don't change. They are your anchor. When you live like this, you stop spiraling when things don't go as planned. You adjust, you adapt, you review the system, you tweak the rhythm, but you don't collapse, you don't retreat, because you're not married to a fantasy of how it was supposed to go. You're committed to becoming the kind of person who keeps going. This is how resilience is formed, through repetition, through process, through staying grounded in the action you can take, rather than obsessed with the outcome you can't control. The results will come, but the process is what transforms you. And that transformation will last longer than any short-term win. The fourth way to build a resourceful and resilient mindset is to normalize struggle as part of the process. Because most people still think struggle means something's wrong. They think discomfort is a sign to stop. They think resistance means misalignment. And because of that, they back away from anything that stretches them. They mislabel their growth as failure. They quit the moment it gets heavy. And in doing so, they delay the very strength they were supposed to build. Struggle is not the enemy. Avoiding it is. Because when you avoid struggle, you avoid the places where your mindset is tested, refined, and matured. You avoid the places where you learn what you're really made of. And without that learning, you stay soft, you stay fragile, you stay easily shaken. Struggle is not punishment, it's preparation. And the more you can embrace it, the more resourceful and resilient you become. You build emotional muscle the same way you build physical muscle, through tension, through pressure, through resistance. If everything feels easy, you're not getting stronger. You're staying where you've already mastered. And mastery doesn't live in comfort. It lives in challenge. It lives in stretch. It lives in the places where you feel awkward, underqualified, uncertain, but still show up anyway. If you never struggle, you never stretch. If you never stretch, you never grow. And if you never grow, you never access the version of yourself that's required to live the life you actually want. So instead of fearing the hard parts, train yourself to expect them, to welcome them, to say, this is where the work starts. This is where I get better. This is where I build something that lasts. Most people waste so much time trying to avoid struggle that they never learn how to move through it. They build entire lives around convenience, then wonder why they feel restless, bored, unfulfilled. Comfort does not produce purpose. And if you want to build a mindset that can handle anything, you have to teach yourself how to sit with difficulty, not escape it, not avoid it. Sit with it, study it, let it form you. This isn't about loving pain. It's about respecting the role it plays. It's about understanding that without resistance, there's no depth, no insight, no character. Resilient people don't chase struggle, but they don't run from it either. They see it for what it is, a tool, a teacher, a builder, a filter that separates the casual from the committed. You have to shift your internal narrative around struggle. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what is this building in me? Instead of saying, this shouldn't be this hard, say, of course it's hard. This matters. That language shapes your lens. That lens shapes your behavior. And that behavior shapes your results. If you only do what's easy, you'll never know what you're capable of. But if you get comfortable with hard things, if you normalize challenge, you become dangerous in the best way. You become someone who doesn't panic under pressure, who doesn't need guarantees to move forward, who doesn't crumble when things don't go as planned. That's what resilience looks like. Not the absence of difficulty, but the decision to walk through it with your eyes open and your mind steady, to stay focused when it gets hard, to keep learning when it gets messy, to keep showing up when it's inconvenient, and to know deep down that the struggle is not stopping you, it's shaping you. Next, the fifth way to build a resourceful and resilient mindset is to become the kind of person who creates options instead of waiting for them. Because resourcefulness isn't about how much you have. It's about what you do with what's in front of you. It's not about access. It's about mindset. It's about refusing to stay stuck. It's about the decision to find a way, even if the road you thought you'd take disappears. Most people stop when their plan fails. They shut down when the path changes. They wait for someone to hand them a new map. But resourceful people don't freeze when the original route gets blocked. They look for side roads, they ask new questions, they improvise, they reframe the challenge, they gather information, they find tools, they create a new plan. When you're truly resourceful, your default is motion, not permission. You don't need every detail to start. You don't wait for certainty. You take inventory. You ask, what can I use? What do I already know? Who can I ask? Where can I start with what I have? That mindset puts you back in the driver's seat. It reminds you that even if you can't control the obstacle, you can still control your response. And that response matters because most of the time, the difference between people who succeed and people who quit isn't intelligence. It's adaptability. It's the ability to say, okay, this door closed. What else is available? This didn't work. What can I learn from it? This tool is gone. How do I build one? It's not about always having the right answer. It's about being the kind of person who won't stop until they find one. And that kind of persistence, rooted in curiosity instead of frustration, is what creates breakthroughs. It's what turns problems into possibilities. It's what helps you build something out of what looked like nothing. The most resourceful people aren't the ones with the most resources. They're the ones who stopped believing they needed more in order to begin. They didn't have more. They just used what they had more creatively. They turned rejection into redirection. They turned failure into feedback. They turned scarcity into strategy. If you want to build that kind of mindset, you have to train your brain to stop fixating on what's missing. Instead, ask what's available. If the money isn't there, what time do you have? If the time is limited, what habits can you change? If the people around you can't help, what books, mentors, or resources can? You can't grow while staring at what's unavailable, but you can grow by leaning fully into what is. This mindset builds resilience, because when things fall apart, most people freeze. They wait for normal to return. They wait for stability. But resourceful people adjust faster. They don't need normal. They just need movement. And because they're used to finding a way, they move forward while everyone else waits. You won't always have the ideal tools. You won't always have support. You won't always get the timing you wanted, but you will always have yourself, your mind, your ability to learn, your creativity, your adaptability. And if you build those muscles, you become unstoppable because you're not relying on everything going right. You're counting on yourself to respond well when it doesn't. Okay, now the sixth way to build a resourceful and resilient mindset is to take radical ownership. Not partial, not selective, radical. Ownership that doesn't make excuses, doesn't shift blame, and doesn't wait for someone else to take responsibility. Because the more ownership you take, the more power you hold. And without ownership, resilience becomes reactive. It becomes fragile. It becomes conditional. But with ownership, you don't just survive circumstances, you shape them. Most people think ownership is about fault. It's not. It's about response. You may not be responsible for what happened, but you're always responsible for what happens next. You don't get to choose every storm, but you get to choose your posture inside it. You get to choose your words, your mindset, your behavior. That's where the power is. And that's what ownership gives you, the power to respond instead of waiting to be rescued. You know someone is stuck when they're still rehearsing why it's not their fault. You know someone is rising when they start saying, this is mine to carry. This is mine to shift. This is mine to change. Not because they caused it, but because they've decided they will no longer outsource their future to circumstances. And when you begin to take ownership at that level, your mindset starts to shift. You stop seeing challenges as interruptions. You start seeing them as invitations. Invitations to rise, to lead, to adjust, to become more resourceful, more creative, more focused. You stop waiting for things to get easier. You start preparing to get stronger. Ownership doesn't make you harsh. It makes you clear. It clarifies what's yours to fix and what's not. It keeps your energy pointed in the right direction. It eliminates blame because blame has no use in growth. Blame slows things down. Blame disempowers. Ownership accelerates. Ownership simplifies. Ownership keeps you moving forward. And this mindset doesn't just apply to big decisions. It applies to the small ones too. Are you owning your time or are you letting it slip? Are you owning your attention or are you being distracted by everything around you? Are you owning your habits or are you stuck in patterns you pretend you can't control? Radical ownership asks better questions and then it follows through. This kind of thinking builds internal stability because now when something breaks, you don't collapse. You assess, you decide, you move, you don't panic, you don't point fingers. You don't wait for circumstances to change before you do. You take responsibility for your part, and then you lead. Ownership is not easy. It requires maturity. It requires humility. It requires a willingness to sit with your patterns and say, that's mine, and I'm changing it. But the people who lead their lives with that kind of honesty, the ones who stop protecting their pride and start protecting their growth, those are the people who become resilient. Those are the people who can handle anything. And the moment you stop blaming is the moment you start building. Because now you've reclaimed your power. Now you're not waiting. Now you're leading. And that's what resilience really is. Not perfection, but responsibility. Not strength without pain, but leadership inside pain. Not control over outcomes, but command over your response. Next, the seventh way to build a resourceful and resilient mindset is to stop negotiating with excuses. Because excuses are not passive. They are powerful. They are seductive. They disguise themselves as logic. They use your past to argue against your future. They make the path of least resistance feel like the path of wisdom. And if you don't train your mind to challenge them, you will start to believe them. You will defend them. You will wrap your identity around them, and slowly they will steal your potential. Excuses sound reasonable. That's what makes them dangerous. I don't have time. It's not the right season. I don't know enough yet. I'll start when things calm down. That's just not my personality. This is just who I am. These phrases don't feel like lies. They feel like facts. But they're not facts. They're permissions. Permissions you've given yourself to stay the same, to stay small, to avoid responsibility. A resourceful mind doesn't avoid the challenge. It exposes the excuse. It doesn't entertain the story. It interrogates it. Is this really true? Or is this just familiar? Is this the full truth? Or is it a convenient way to delay discomfort? Because most excuses aren't based on reality. They're based on fear. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of change. And fear can only survive when you don't question it. You build resilience by being brutally honest with your inner dialogue. When your mind offers you an excuse, you don't let it go unchecked. You respond. You ask for evidence. You challenge the logic. You ask, who would I be without this excuse? That question can change your life because most of us aren't limited by reality. We're limited by the reasons we've accepted to stop showing up. And those reasons feel safe. They protect your ego. They keep you from trying. They keep you from risking, but they also keep you from rising. Because the same thought that protects you from failure also prevents you from growth. And eventually the comfort those excuses gave you turns into frustration. You wake up one day and realize you've built your life around your fears instead of your potential. You don't become resilient by never feeling resistance. You become resilient by refusing to let resistance make your decisions. When your body says, I'm tired, but you know you've got more, you stretch. When your fear says, don't do it, but your purpose says, you must, you act. When your excuses say, you're not ready, but your life says, it's time, you move. This doesn't mean you ignore wisdom. It doesn't mean you burn out. It means you know the difference between rest and avoidance, between preparation and procrastination, between boundaries and barriers. A resourceful mindset knows how to draw that line, and it knows how to keep moving when that line gets tested. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be honest. Honest about the fact that your mind will try to protect you in ways that are no longer helpful. Honest about the fact that you will feel fear, and that fear doesn't need to get a vote. Honest about the fact that if you keep feeding your excuses, they'll keep growing. And the only way to break that cycle is to make a new decision. A decision to stop waiting for the perfect time. A decision to stop giving your fear a microphone. A decision to stop negotiating with the part of you that's only trying to keep you safe. Safety isn't the goal. Growth is. And growth always begins where your excuses end. Next, the 8th way to build a resourceful and resilient mindset is to practice emotional agility. Because setbacks don't just challenge your plans, they challenge your emotions. They rattle your peace, shake your confidence, and pull your attention away from clarity and into chaos. And if you haven't trained yourself to move through emotion without becoming trapped in it, you'll drown in moments that were meant to develop you. You don't need to suppress how you feel. You need to move with it, through it, around it. You need to feel it without being consumed by it. That's emotional agility. The ability to acknowledge your emotion, name it, sit with it, and still choose your next step intentionally. Most people get stuck not because the situation is too heavy, but because their emotions hijack their decisions. They feel fear and interpret it as, I shouldn't do this. They feel sadness and interpret it as, I'm failing. They feel overwhelmed and assume they're incapable. But emotions aren't instructions. They're information. They're signals. They're indicators of what's happening inside, not final verdicts about what you can or can't do. A resilient person knows how to listen to emotion without letting it become a script. They say, yes, I'm afraid, and I'm still going to speak. Yes, I'm uncertain, and I'm still going to move. Yes, this hurts, but it's not the end of me. They separate what they feel from who they are. They separate emotion from identity. That separation creates space, and in that space is where response lives. You can build this skill. It's not a personality trait. It's not something you're born with. It's something you practice. You practice by noticing what you're feeling, by not running from discomfort, by not reacting immediately. You breathe. You name it. You ask, where's this coming from? What's underneath this? What do I want to do about it? That self-awareness is the foundation. Then you begin to decouple emotions from your value. Just because you feel fear doesn't mean you're weak. Just because you feel lost doesn't mean you're broken. Just because you feel angry doesn't mean you're out of control. Emotions are natural. They are part of being human. But being human doesn't mean you live at the mercy of every passing feeling. This kind of agility also helps you stay connected to others. Because when you can navigate your own emotion, you stop projecting it onto the people around you. You stop lashing out. You stop withdrawing in silence. You start communicating with clarity. You start leading with grace. You start listening with presence. That's what makes you a force, not just for yourself, but for the people who depend on you. And in high-stress environments, this skill becomes a superpower. When everyone else is spinning, you stay grounded. When tension is high, you hold the tone. When change is fast, you adjust. Not because you're unshaken, but because you've trained your mind to move through the shaking without losing your center. Emotional agility doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't flee. It means you don't freeze. It means you keep your identity steady even when your atmosphere is swirling. And when you lead yourself like that consistently, you build something unshakable. A way of thinking, a way of living, a way of showing up that no longer depends on everything going right. The ninth way to build a resourceful and resilient mindset is to surround yourself with truth tellers, not comfort givers. Because the people around you shape how you think. They influence how you interpret struggle. They set the tone for what feels normal. And if you're surrounded by people who only tell you what you want to hear, your mindset will be weak, fragile, dependent on affirmation. But if you're surrounded by people who speak truth with love and challenge, with care, your mindset will get stronger, sharper, more grounded. You don't need cheerleaders all the time. You need clarity. You need people who will call you out when you're drifting, who will push you when you're playing small, who will ask better questions when you're stuck in low-level thinking. People who aren't impressed by your excuses. People who won't let you live beneath your standard. Not because they're judging you, but because they believe in you. Comfort givers are everywhere. They'll tell you you're fine when you're not. They'll say, it's okay, just rest, when what you really need is to get up and move. They mean well. They're not trying to harm you, but they'll keep you soft. And softness without stretch turns into stagnation. You weren't made to be babied. You were made to be built. And the people around you will either build with you or pull you back. They will either challenge your comfort zone or help reinforce it. They will either reflect the version of you that you're becoming or the version you're trying to outgrow. That's why environment matters. Not just physical environment, but relational environment. A resilient mind grows best in honest conversation. Conversations that hold you accountable. Conversations that don't let your excuses stand unchallenged. Conversations where iron sharpens iron. That's how you get better. That's how you expand your capacity. Not by isolating, not by only listening to your own echo chamber, but by submitting yourself to truth spoken by people who love you enough to risk your discomfort. You build resourcefulness the same way when you talk to people who have walked through things you haven't. When you ask questions instead of pretending you already know. When you lean into wisdom, not just validation. When you stop needing to be right and start being ready to grow. And sometimes the hardest truth teller is you. You have to look in the mirror and ask, where am I avoiding responsibility? Where am I choosing distraction over discipline? Where am I pretending to be stuck when I'm just scared? You can't build a resilient life on lies, even polite lies, even convenient ones. You have to get honest with yourself, with your mentors, with the people walking with you. This isn't about surrounding yourself with critics. It's about being around people who won't let you coast. People who care too much to let you waste your life in patterns that don't serve your future. And when you find those people, listen to them. Invite their feedback. Stay open. Stay teachable. Let their words sharpen you instead of defend yourself against them. The stronger your circle, the stronger your thinking. The clearer your conversations, the clearer your mindset. And the more honest the voices you allow around you, the more resilient you'll become when life pushes back. Because now, you won't just have your own strength, you'll have theirs too. Next, the 10th way to build a resourceful and resilient mindset is to remember your capacity in the moments you forget. Because no matter how strong you are, there will be days when you doubt it. There will be seasons where nothing seems to work, where momentum disappears, where progress feels like a memory. And in those moments, you will be tempted to shrink, to backtrack, to abandon everything you've built because you can't feel your strength anymore. But resilience isn't just about how you perform when you're on top of your game. It's about what you choose when the game feels like it's slipping away, when clarity feels out of reach, when courage feels quiet, when purpose feels buried. That's when you need to remember, not emotionally, but intentionally. Remember who you've been. Remember what you've already overcome. Remember the nights you didn't quit. Remember the moments you kept showing up when everything in you wanted to disappear. You have evidence. You have history. You have proof that you've survived before, grown before, found your way before. And if you could make it through that, you can make it through this. That memory is not just nostalgia. It's fuel. It's strategy. It's resilience in action. Resourceful people use their own past as reference points for power. They don't just see what's missing. They see what's already been built. They keep a record, not of failure, but of perseverance. They rehearse what's worked. They revisit the lessons. They don't let short-term emotions erase long-term evidence. You don't always need a new plan. Sometimes you just need to be reminded of your own progress, that you've grown, that you've healed, that you've adjusted, that you've kept moving even when it felt impossible, that you've rebuilt more than once. And you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. In the hard moments, memory becomes your anchor. But it has to be the right kind of memory, not the ones that remind you of what you lost, the ones that remind you of what you found in yourself when things fell apart. You found grit. You found vision. You found leadership, and you'll find them again if you stop telling yourself that this setback is different. Everything in life moves in seasons, and not every season is supposed to feel powerful. Some seasons feel heavy on purpose because weight builds muscle, resistance builds strength, and tension builds capacity. But if you quit in those seasons, you'll never discover just how much capacity you actually have. There's more in you than you've accessed. More strength, more grace, more wisdom, more adaptability. And the only way to see it is to keep walking, even when it's dark, even when the path feels unfamiliar, even when you're not sure where it leads. Because the only way through the fog is forward. And the only way to rise is to remember that you've done it before. This is how you finish strong. By remembering that power is not a feeling, it's a decision to rise one more time, to trust one more time, to build one more time, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because that's what resilience looks like. It doesn't wait to feel ready. It remembers it already is. You don't need a perfect life to live powerfully. You don't need flawless conditions to build something meaningful. You don't need every answer, every connection, every advantage. What you need is a mindset that refuses to be limited by what it doesn't have and instead focuses on what it can become. A mindset that stays steady when the path shakes. That gets creative when resources are few. That finds strength, not in the absence of struggle, but in the presence of strategy. The difference between those who grow and those who stall isn't who had it easier. It's who made better decisions when things got hard. Who didn't wait for life to calm down before they took action. Who didn't let emotions run their schedule. Who didn't let excuses speak louder than vision. who didn't forget what they carried just because their circumstances got loud. Resourcefulness and resilience are not personality traits. They're not things you're born with. They're practices, disciplines, muscles that strengthen every time you choose growth over comfort, courage over fear, ownership over blame. Every time you pause instead of panic, every time you adjust instead of collapse, every time you create something new from what looked like nothing. You don't have to wait for life to force these skills on you. You can choose them now. You can train now. You can become someone who knows how to lead yourself when no one else is doing the thinking for you. Someone who stays curious in the middle of crisis. Someone who uses challenge as a workshop, not a wall. Someone who remembers their strength instead of rehearsing their stress. That kind of mindset doesn't just help you win, it helps you last. It makes you flexible in uncertainty, steady in storms, calm in chaos, focused when others are scattered. That kind of mindset builds not just a better life, but a better version of you, one who isn't easily broken, one who isn't defined by failure, one who's always building, always adapting, always becoming. And no one can build it for you. You can borrow inspiration. You can learn strategies. You can sit under mentorship. But at some point, you have to decide. Decide that you will no longer outsource your mental strength. Decide that your response is your responsibility. Decide that your mind is a tool, not a prison. You can keep living reactively, waiting for circumstances to dictate your energy. Or you can take the lead. You can choose your focus. You can ask better questions. You can anchor into the process. You can reject the excuses. You can welcome the stretch. You can stop performing and start becoming. Your mind can either be your strongest asset or your loudest liability, but you decide which. You decide what to feed it, what to repeat, what to question, what to believe. And every day you choose wisely, your future opens up. Not because life gets easier, but because you got stronger.